So, how does a nation find its voice? I don't just mean the language people speak, but its actual written identity? For one country, the answer came from a place you would never, ever expect. We're going to dive into the incredible story of how the mission to translate a single book accidentally kicked off a literary revolution.
Think about it. A nation is so much more than just lines on a map, right? It's a shared culture, a history, a language. But what happens when that language only exists in the air? When there's no common alphabet, no books to tie people together? How do you even begin to build a shared national story?
Well, for the Albanian people, the answer was as wild as it was powerful. And believe it or not, it all started with just one book, brought in by outsiders who had absolutely no idea they were about to help change the course of history for an entire nation. To really get the impact of this, we've got to go back in time, way back to the early 19th century. We're talking about Albania, a nation of people with this rich, ancient history and a totally unique language, but a nation almost completely without its own books. And look, this was a huge problem. We're talking about a language spoken by over 800,000 people, but with no standardized alphabet. None. It was a culture passed down only by word of mouth. It was missing that literary foundation, that glue you need to build a modern national identity.
This quote from a missionary, Robert Pinkerton, just nails the situation at the time. From his point of view, he saw spiritual problem, sure, but what he was really identifying was the core issue, a people who couldn't read a single word of literature in their own native tongue. For him, the answer was religious. For Albania, it would turn out to be revolutionary. And this, right here, is where the story gets really fascinating. It leads to one of the most unlikely partnerships you can imagine. Two groups with completely different, almost opposite goals, who somehow came together over the power of a printed book. So check this out. On one side, you've got these Protestant missionaries. Their whole mission is driven by this idea of sola scriptura, the belief that everyone should be able to read the Bible in their own language. Then, on the other side, you have Albanian nationalists who knew deep down that to be a real independent nation, they needed a unified written language. Their end goals? Worlds apart. But they found this incredible common ground. They both needed to create the Albanian book.
And this quote just says it all. It comes from Mithat Frashëri, who was a major Albanian intellectual, and a Bektashi Muslim, not a Christian. That's key. He saw the work of the Bible Society as this profound act of patriotism. For people like him, it wasn't about religion. It was about national dignity. It was about cultural survival.
So, a powerful idea was born. But ideas are just ideas until people make them real. So let's meet the pioneers who actually took on this monumental task of basically creating a written language from the ground up.
Think of these two as the perfect partnership. You had the scholar, Constantin Christoforidi, the linguistic genius doing the hard work of translation, and then you had the organizer, Alexander Thompson, the guy who built the entire distribution network. One couldn't succeed without the other. Thompson hired dozens of these traveling booksellers, they were called colporteurs, to physically carry Christoforidi's work into every single corner of the Albanian lands.
And just look at the momentum they built. It's incredible. In just 6 years, they went from having basically no books to publishing these foundational texts in both of the major dialects. This wasn't some slow trickle. This was a publishing explosion that laid the groundwork for literally everything that came next.
Now let that number sink in for a minute. 27,000 books, delivered on foot, by horseback, to cities and tiny remote villages. To Christians and Muslims, it didn't matter. This wasn't just some symbolic gesture. This was a mass literacy campaign that put the written Albanian language directly into the hands of the people for the very first time.
Okay, so creating the books is one thing, but the real revolution, that began when people started to read them and teach them. This is how that spark of literacy truly transformed Albanian society. And the next chapter of the story belongs to one amazing family, the Kurios family. They basically took the spark of literacy that the translators had created and fanned it into the flame of a national education movement. So look how it builds. First, you have the brother, Gerasim Kurios. He builds on the work of the booksellers, creating communities and holding the first ever church services in the Albanian language. Then his sisters, Savasti and Parashkivi, they take the next brilliant step. They use this new standardized language to do something truly radical at the time. They opened the first school dedicated to teaching Albanian girls in their own language. I absolutely love this quote from Sevasti's memoirs. You can just feel the raw pride in her words. For the first time in her life, she could point to a bookshelf and say, "That's us. That is our language, our culture, right there in print." These books weren't just paper and ink. They were a declaration that they existed.
So this incredible story of a national awakening had a massive impact. But history, well, it took a very sharp, very brutal turn in the 20th century. And for decades, this entire chapter was almost completely erased.
This timeline, it lays it all out, and it's pretty chilling. The progress was real. By 1908, they had a unified official Albanian alphabet. But then the communist takeover happened. And in 1967, something unimaginable happened. Albania was declared the world's first officially atheist state. The regime didn't just discourage religion, it set out to wipe it from the country's memory. The very Bibles and books that had helped create a national literary language were now labeled enemy propaganda. They were rounded up, they were destroyed. And the story of the missionaries, the translators, the Krias family, it was just deleted from the official history books.
But a story this powerful, well, it can't stay buried forever. After communism fell in 1991, historians started to piece it all back together. And the whole thing came full circle in 2017, when Albania's own National Library hosted a conference to celebrate this 200-year journey, finally honoring the unlikely alliance that gave the nation its written voice. A lost history finally found.
It's just such a powerful story of unintended consequences, isn't it? A religious mission ends up sparking a nationalist awakening. It really makes you wonder, what other hidden forces, what other unlikely connections are shaping the world we know right now in ways we can't even see yet?